On this episode, we're talking about how to grow a $1 million business as a one-person show.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all. Do you have a product or service that you would like to sell online? Or maybe you've been thinking about it, but you're reserved to do it because you need a website, you need complicated systems, and you need to spend money? Well, I've created a completely free course that teaches you how to use Facebook in a purely organic way. This means no ads and no money are needed. You can use Facebook completely free. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com, opt into my Profit from Social Media course. I'm going to teach you the free methods to using Facebook to make money today.
I'm sure you've heard of her, Elaine Pofeldt. She is the author of The $1 Million One-Person Business, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Maybe you've seen her work in Fortune, Money, CNBC, Inc., Forbes, or Crane's New York Business, or tons of other publications. We're thrilled to have her on the show.
All right, Thriving Launchers, we are here with Elaine Pofeldt. Elaine, are you ready to launch?
I'm ready to be here, Louise. So nice to be here with you and Kamala.
Thriving Launchers, I've been reading Elaine's book. I've been following her on social media and all the various places that she writes for, including Forbes and various other magazines. She is a prolific writer. She writes a lot about million-dollar businesses that are run by one person. What got you interested in that, and why do you think this topic is so important in today's world?
Well, Louise, I have been writing about entrepreneurship for many years, and one thing I noticed was that almost all of the coverage of entrepreneurs focuses on the high revenue, ultra scalable businesses that we see in Silicon Valley, and those are really exciting. But there's a whole other world of small businesses that make up the majority of businesses in the U.S. that really don't get covered. And when I came across U.S. Census Bureau statistics showing that there were actually businesses with no employees that were breaking $1 million in revenue, I got really curious, and that touched off the journey that led to this book.
That is so important because most of the entrepreneurs that we're connected with, they're solopreneurs or they have a really small team. And it's something that I really tried on my own for years to do every aspect of the business completely alone. And then when I met Louise and we started a business together and when we grew a team, things just continued to take off from there. So I'm a big believer in having a team now because I don't want to do everything on my own anymore. So I want to hear, like, how do you actually do it alone?
Well, the idea of the $1 million one-person business isn't really to do it alone. The Census Bureau defines businesses with no W-2 employees as non-employer businesses. So I use that as my definition. But when you scratch the surface, a lot of the owners of the businesses in the book do have a team. They might use contractors, they might use outsourced services, or they might use automation. So it would be a virtual team, I guess. But they're not doing every little bit of minutia on their own. In fact, that's part of their overall outlook on running the business. They don't really think it makes sense to enter every transaction in QuickBooks themselves, for instance. They understand that it's better to put their time and energy into high-value activities that will grow the business.
So what are some of the things that you found when we look at qualities? Because Thriving Launches, as much as, for me anyways, one of the reasons why I love doing this show is I get to learn from experts, and I learn to find little tips, tricks, hacks, mindsets that allow me to tap into something. In your research and in your work, what are some of the commonalities that you found that make this kind of person? I mean, the idea of being able to run a multi-million or $1 million business or multi-million dollar business with just me or my partner and a couple other people that are contractors. Like, what are some of the mindsets necessary to be able to even do that?
One of the things I notice is they really do make an effort to figure out ways to accomplish more than the typical one person business can. They give it a lot of thought. They give a lot of thought to strategy. They set aside time to step back from the business and think about how they're using their time. Because as you both know, when you're in an ultra lean business, time is your main commodity. So if you're wasting it, you really won't get to 1 million. You have to really think about, how do I deploy my time in the maximum effective way that I can to generate revenue, and not just revenue but profits. Because if you're pouring if you're pouring all your revenue back into the business, you might not have any money to take out to live on, which in most of the ultra lean businesses, they are lifestyle business. People do want to live on them. It's not like Amazon, where you just keep on reinvesting in it and eventually, everybody cashes out. So there is definitely a conscious effort among the entrepreneurs that I interviewed. I interviewed the owners of more than 30 businesses for this book, and probably all told about 50 of the $1 million one-person businesses and partnerships that are out there. The Census Bureau found in 2015 that there were more than 35,000 of these businesses, and that number was up 33% since 2011. But it's still a relatively small number. And having the small sample size actually was helpful to me, because I could sort of see common threads, even though they were in very different businesses. Some were in e-commerce, some were in manufacturing, informational content creation, things like webinars, professional services, personal services like nutritional coaching, that sort of thing, and real estate. They're all very different industries, but there was a real emphasis on productivity and efficiency and preserving their lifestyle so that they weren't just working 24/7.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the tips that you learned, or if there was anything that you've noticed about productivity and strategy that is a common thread, a little bit more in depth on that.
Well, one thing that I noticed was they're hyper specialized. The folks that are running these businesses might have multiple revenue streams, but they are not in multiple industries. Sometimes people can spread themselves too thin. And I think as entrepreneurs, we have a lot of ideas, and it's easy to spin off in all different directions. These folks maintain their productivity by getting very specialized in what they do best. So, for instance, Megan Telpner is a nutritionist, and she runs a site called megantelpner.com. It's a wellness site. She wound up healing herself from Crohn's disease. She's been in remission for 10 years by changing her lifestyle. She actually went back to school, left an advertising career, and studied nutrition. And she's created a variety of different revenue streams within that expertise. So she's written a couple of cookbooks with Random House. She launched the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, which is a school to train other people, both nutritionists and lay people, in her cooking methods. And then she has individual products. Like one of her first ones was called the Green Smoothie Fast, and it showed people how to go on a 3-day fast, drinking healthy green smoothies. But they're all really in this core area. She's not branching out into e-commerce or real estate or something totally different. And I think the deeper you go into something, the more value you can bring, the more you know about the conversation in that industry and what's been done before and what hasn't been done. So I think that's one of the most important things. It's also your selling point. One of the business brokers whom I've interviewed about this subject, David Fairley, talked about e-commerce stores and how they can compete against Amazon when they're just one person. And the secret is that the owner really brings their personality and expertise to the subject. So he was giving me a list of some really wacky sounding types of businesses, like sites that sell things along the lines of ceramic garden gnomes, or things like that. And you would think, okay, who would go to that website? But apparently there are people that love ceramic garden gnomes and will buy a lot of them. And the people that run these sites get really specialized in their expertise. So that makes them different and more fun to deal with than the really big companies of the world that have that sort of corporate personality.
I just want to back up what you're saying here. Our most successful clients and our podcast guests, they're people that specialize. They have a niche. They know what they're going to do, and sometimes the more specific it is, the further it reaches. with some exceptions of things that are just way, way off, that are way too specific, but that's hardly ever the case. So I like the garden gnomes is a perfect example, and I'm so glad you brought that up.
It is funny. I mean, you can sometimes get too specialized, but it's not always a mistake to be specialized. There might be something that you do that only a few people can do, in which case you might be able to charge a very high fee for that expertise. One example would be if you're a specialized programmer, for instance, maybe you target Wall Street banks. You might be able to charge $1,000 an hour for your skills if there aren't that many programmers who do what you do. That doesn't work for everybody. I mean, sometimes you can introduce a very specialized product and the audience is so small it's virtually non-existent, in which case
Yeah.
you don't have much of a business. But the beauty of business today is it's so easy to test market things. I mean, it's so easy to put up a website and sell something or to put up one product on Amazon. You don't have to make a huge investment to see if there actually is an audience, or you can go through your network if you're selling a professional service and ask people, would you actually pay money? I'm planning on introducing this service. Would you pay this much for it? If you wouldn't, why not? Why isn't it useful to you? And get some feedback from people that you know well enough, of course, but it's really easy to test. So I would say don't hold yourself back. If you think your interest is really wonky, it might not be as wonky as you think.
Elaine, one of the last questions I want to ask you here as we wrap up is, what do you think empowered people to make these kinds of leaps? Because in my experience, again, I didn't go out and interview 50 people, so I wouldn't know quite as well as you, but what I've seen from reading different books, reading some of your stuff, and just my own personal experiences, that a lot of people who get into these businesses and have these kinds of successes are everyday, regular kinds of people. They're people with families, people who have an education, maybe got a college degree and had this looming debt and a job they didn't like, or they didn't get a degree and they're working a job that they just absolutely don't like, or they have some sort of bigger vision. They want to travel the world and run an online business. And one of the questions I have for you is, what do you think kind of empowers or encourages people to make this kind of leap? And I ask you this because I'm very well aware that a lot of you Thriving Launchers tuning in are thinking about making this leap or already have and just need some pointers or some insights. And what do you think just empowers people to make this kind of leap?
Well, Louise, one thing that empowers them is giving themselves the financial runway. I think we've been encouraged to think of business as something you just leap into with 2 feet, never look back, burn your bridges. But a lot of people have financial responsibilities where they can't just quit their job. And I noticed a number of the entrepreneurs in the book didn't quit their job. They test marketed their idea while they still had a job. And that gave them enough cash flow coming in to actually act on their idea and give it the time it took. We all see these restaurants in our towns or communities where it opens and then it's closed in 2 months, right? And you realize what happened. Nobody knew that it was open. The owner ran out of money, and this is their whole life stream. They put several $100,000 into it, and now it's closed, and it went nowhere because they didn't have enough cash to give it time to take root. And so these folks have avoided that mistake by giving themselves time and being patient about it. The other thing I noticed is they are perpetual learners. The people that get to $1 million one-person businesses or partnerships are not linear thinkers based on my observation. They are constantly taking in feedback from all directions. They don't expect there to be 5 easy steps to starting and growing a business. They put their ideas out there. They gather information in real time and they react to it in real time. It takes a certain amount of mental output to do that. It's not a linear thing. They might make mistakes. They might have to course correct, but they're prepared for that because they have a bigger vision of the life that they want, and they're committed to getting there and committed to making the mistakes that they can learn from. And part of that is having a little bit of financial reserves to do it. It doesn't mean they had a lot. I would say the majority of the people in the book were regular people who started with less than $5,000, and in many cases less than $1,000. It wasn't that they had a giant kitty to put into it, but they did give themselves enough room in their lives to experiment and learn. And that's what I would leave the listeners with, is you really have to be open to new feedback. If you want to grow a business like this, the world is changing very fast. Technologies are changing very fast. And if you're receptive, there's a lot of great information out there that you can take in and apply to building your own $1 million one-person business. Yeah, but it's not going to happen passively. I hear all kinds of things about passive income, and maybe ideally in some future year you'll set up some things that bring in passive income. But in the beginning, there's nothing passive about it. It's an active process, and it's something you have to enjoy. But if you do, it'll be amazing, because you won't have the financial stress that a lot of people do in solo businesses and partnerships, where they're just scrambling from one project to the next, can barely afford to get health insurance. One blown out tire is a crisis. You won't be living like that anymore. And that's a really nice reward, because it's hard to achieve, but it will bring you a lot of financial peace and freedom.
Elaine Pofeldt, it's been so lovely sitting down and talking with you about this topic, and I know that you have your new book about it too. How do we grow a one-person $1 million business? One thing that I really loved about what you've talked about, that so many of our guests have said, and I really just want to drive it home again, is the thing that these businesses have in common is that they're specific. And I just encourage all of you to reach into your business and ask, is there a way that I can be even more specific? It's always good to reevaluate what we're doing. So with that, Thriving Launchers, go out there, keep thriving. You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.